Hi, this is Ted. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my last week. Because this last week I was reading Josephus. Why am I reading Josephus quite a bit lately? It's because I'm thinking about creating another YouTube channel just summarizing Josephus. Why Josephus? Josephus is an historian who presents some history from the Jewish nation around the time, before the time of Jesus, during the time of Jesus, and after the time of Jesus. And these things are important. These are what we want to understand for the background of the political situation that Jesus was in. All right, so I'm reading Josephus' autobiography. It just started. And as I'm reading the autobiography, I notice he's on the defense. He's fighting those people who are trolling him in the first century. He's explaining to them, I'm not of poor blood. I'm not of a lower class. I am of noble blood. The nobility runs in my family. There is a king in my ancestry. There are priests, the highest priests in the nation. I am part of that. And the people who've gone before me, I've had a high priest, maybe several of them. And I found all these things in public record. And he tells the people that are listening to him reading, he says, so I bid adieu, goodbye to those who would say I am of lower nobility, because I am of the highest nobility there is in our country. So don't be saying I am low class, because I am not. In fact, when I was 14 years old, I would talk, and the people came to me. The Pharisees, the religious leaders, they came to me and listened to what I had to say, because I knew so much of the law. And I shortly thereafter began living with and studying under Sadducees, under Essenes, and with a hermit out in the desert, and finally with the Pharisees. And I am now a Pharisee. So he presents all this as a defense to let his audience know that those accusations that he comes from a lower class or has no nobility in his family or in his blood, they're wrong. Now, reading this, and I'm thinking, this sounds kind of like Paul from time to time, who defends himself. Only this defense is a little different. Paul the Apostle, he lived he wrote 20, 30 years before this was written, the autobiography of Josephus. And Paul defends himself in at least 3 places in his writings. And I'm going to kind of summarize to you, first of all, what he's defending himself against, and then what he says. And first of all, there are 2 different accusations made toward Paul. The first one is not necessarily an accusation against him, but people leaving him or thinking lowly of him because he's not as good as the celebrity Christian leaders. Who are the celebrity Christian leaders? There's going to be Apollos and Cephas, Peter, James, and John. Why are they so big? Well, Apollos, because he was an amazing speaker. But for Peter, James, and John, they walked with Jesus. Paul didn't, but they did. And you had people coming out of Jerusalem talking to us, telling us that they are under Peter and James and John. They've been listening to them. They've heard Jesus. So all these things are making them celebrities. And Paul can't compete with that. What has he got? Paul, he turns this whole thing around and he'll say, okay, those in Jerusalem who seem to be somebodies, whatsoever they are, it doesn't matter to me. God does not accept a person, like he doesn't have favoritism. And then Paul starts bragging. Josephus bragged about his blood, his bloodline. But Paul also will brag, but a little differently. He says, I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees. I'm one of the best. I was a Pharisee of Pharisees. So he's a Pharisee. He's a Jew of Jews, and he's more zealous than anybody. And he wants people to know that. But you know what he says? These things are the flesh, and I have crucified them. In other words, they're celebrity worship. They're putting Peter, James, and John at such heights because they are in Jerusalem and they walked with Jesus. Their celebrity worship is not from the Spirit of God. It's fleshly, and something that Paul says needs to be put to death. And in fact, even goes to the point in Galatians of talking about Peter, when Peter really messed up, and he called Peter out in front of everybody. And he also is quick to point out that when I went to Jerusalem and gave them my gospel, I told them what my gospel was, because I received from revelation from God I should do this. I shared that. I put it before them. And they had nothing to add, except that we should remember the poor, which I was quick to do. Yeah, duh, I'm going to remember the poor. So Paul takes a different approach, but he does boast about something else. Now, those things he kind of says, these things are of the flesh. I'll boast if you want it, but it's fleshly, and I've crucified these things, my identity, everything. But you know what? I'm going to boast some. I suffered more than anybody. Well, he doesn't say more than anybody. But he starts boasting about all the things he went through. Not to find pity, not to say, oh, woe is me, look at me, but rather to say, this, if you want a sign that God is working in me, these are the signs God is working in me, because when I am weak, he is strong. The more I go through these things, when I despair of life, it is Christ who raises me up. You see the difference. He's going to boast, but he's going to boast about his sufferings. Everything else, all other types of boasting, he considers fleshly and something that needs to be crucified and let go of. Now, this week, while I'm thinking about these things, I get and I start I start watching a video because one of you commenters said you should check out John Bevere. Was his name Bevere? Yes, John Bevere. And so I start watching John Bevere, just one video, in fact, just a few minutes of that video, and I tap right into it. You know, sometimes I just start halfway through just to see what the message is going to be all about. I get halfway through, started out, and he starts talking, starts bragging about his ministry. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I'm dealing with Paul and with Josephus. But it's a little different twist. Here, I'm going to present this one to you.
I better write. So what I did is I got a notebook piece of paper. I tore it out of a spiral notebook, and I got a Sharpie, and I wrote contract on the top. I wrote a contract with God. And I said, God, I think you're making a huge mistake. You have much better writers. I can't write, so I need grace. And I didn't even know grace empowers us. And I signed the contract. Now today, the books are in the tens of millions. They're in 129 languages in the earth. Do you know that Lisa and I are the most published authors in the entire nation of Vietnam, secular or Christian? And we can say that about at least 40 other languages. Example, we went to Seoul, Korea. The very first time we went to, actually it's only been the only time I went to Seoul, Korea, to do a national conference. They said to me, would you like to do a press conference? We really would like that. I said, well, if you want me to, sure. So I'm expecting 6 reporters to be in the room. I walk in the room, and there's 32 reporters, 5 television stations, and the 3rd largest newspaper in the nation. And the first words out of my mouth were, what are you all doing here? And they said, well, your book's been on the top 10 bestseller list in Korea for the last 2 years every month. And so let me tell you, when I look at these books, the reason my name's on it is because I was the first guy to get to read it. Because I know who wrote that book. It's not my ability to write, it's his ability on me.
John Bevere, he used to actually sit under and minister to and work with Benny Hinn. But he got into his own ministry. And he brags about how popular he is. But he covers that over with it's God. And he implies God will do the same with you if these are the qualifications. You need to find the gift that God has given to you and walk in it. because God will give you the grace to do the rest. You know, when I was young, I was terrible at speaking and writing. But you know what? The second I gave my life to Christ and when I just found out the gift that God gave to me, I was kind of like, no way. But that's exactly what God did to me. And look at me now. Okay, that's kind of his approach on this whole thing. All right, this is Ted. You all have a good day.